الحمد لله رب العالمين اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد وبارك وسلم. Allah says in the Quran, "في قلوبهم مرض," and in their hearts is a disease. فزادهم الله مرضا. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increases that disease. Allah talks about the disease of the heart. Is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about that disease in which you get a heart attack? The disease of the heart that Allah talks about in the Quran is not that disease due to which you get a heart attack. The disease of the heart that Allah talks about in the Quran is that disease because of which it becomes difficult to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That is why the Prophet ﷺ has said in a hadith, "Inna fi jasadi bani Adam lahu sifat." That in the body of a human there is a piece of flesh. إِذَا صَلُحَتْ صَلُحَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ. That when that piece of flesh, when it becomes pure, the whole body becomes pure. إِذَا فَسَدَتْ, and when that piece of flesh becomes bad, the whole body becomes bad and diseased. Allah, know that it is the heart. So when the heart is diseased, the whole body becomes diseased. And when the heart is healthy, the whole body is healthy. So the disease of the heart that Allah talks about in the Quran is not that disease of the heart due to which you get a heart attack. It is that disease of the heart due to which it becomes difficult to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah has a special interest in your heart. That is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the heart many times in the Quran. And one place in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Fi qulubihim marad." In their hearts is a disease. In another place, Allah ta'ala says, "Fi qulubihim zayghun." And in their hearts there is a crookedness. And in one place, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Thumma qasat qulubuhum." And then their hearts became hard. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in another place in the Quran, "Rabbana la tuzigh qulubana." Oh Allah, don't change our hearts again and again. So Allah talks about this heart again and again and again. Why? Because Allah has a special interest in the heart of the human. And what is that special interest? That special interest is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants that there should be nothing in the heart of the mu'min except for the love of Allah. There's a hadith al-Qudsi. Hadith al-Qudsi are those ahadith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself says those words. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I cannot be contained in the heavens. And I cannot be contained in the earth, yet I can be contained in the heart of the mu'min. Allah has a special interest in this. That is why Allah says, in their hearts is a disease. Now, there are signs of the disease of the heart. How do I know that my heart is that diseased heart that Allah is talking about in the Quran? So when you go to a cardiologist, he tells you the signs and the symptoms of the disease of the heart, right? The cardiologist says that if your blood pressure is high, it is a sign that your heart is diseased. So one of the symptoms of the disease of the heart, of the physical heart, is that your blood pressure goes up. And one of the symptoms of the disease of the heart is that when you have irregular heartbeat. One of the signs that the cardiologists, they tell us that your heart is diseased is that when there is shortness of breath. This is one of the symptoms of the disease of the heart. And some cardiologists, they also say this, if the body fat level is more, then they say this is also a symptom that you have heart disease. So the way the doctors of the physical heart have given us the signs and the symptoms of the disease of the physical heart, in the same way the mashayikh of this ummah, they have given us the signs of the disease of the spiritual heart, the heart that Allah talks about in the Quran. And the first sign, the first symptom of the disease of the heart is that when the heart is diseased, worship becomes a very big burden. It becomes difficult to pray. It becomes difficult to come to Salah. It becomes difficult to come to the Masjid. It becomes difficult to open the Quran. It becomes difficult to read Tasbih. It becomes difficult to spend time in the deen of Allah. So when the deen becomes a big burden on your head, it is a sign that this heart is diseased. And the second sign of the disease of the heart that the mashayikh have told us is that when it becomes difficult to leave a sin. That is also a sign that your heart is diseased. And sometimes some people know that whatever this that I'm doing is wrong. I should not be doing this. And even after knowing that I am doing something which is wrong, he cannot control himself and he ends up doing that wrong thing. It means that the heart is diseased. The heart doesn't have the strength to stay away from that sin. It is a weak heart. So the first sign of the disease of the heart is that the worship becomes very burdensome. And the second sign is that leaving sins becomes difficult. The third sign of the disease of the heart is that those things that put you into neglectfulness, those things become very, very dear to you. Spending hours and hours in front of the TV becomes very dear. You love those things which put you into neglectfulness, which take you away from it. Spending hours in front of the TV becomes very, very loved thing for you. Spending hours and hours scrolling that Facebook becomes a very huge, very, very attractive thing for you. Spending hours talking to your friends on the phone becomes very attractive. So all of these things that put you into neglectfulness, if these things become very attractive, again, it is a sign that this heart is diseased. So the sign of the disease of the heart, the first one is, if the heart is diseased, ibadah, worship becomes difficult. The second sign is, leaving sin becomes difficult. And the third sign is, all those things that put you into neglectfulness, all these things become very attractive. And the fourth sign of the disease of the heart is, it becomes difficult to listen to advice. When the father is advising, it becomes difficult to listen. You don't like the father then. And the teacher is advising you that don't you do this is right for you, you don't like the teacher. Your friend is telling you, your imam is telling you that this is wrong, this is right. Good advice, you don't want to listen to. So if the heart is not ready to listen to good advice, again it is a sign that the heart is diseased. Somebody came to Hasan al-Basri rahimahullah. The Shaykh, our hearts are sleeping. The Shaykh said, why do you think your hearts are sleeping? He said, because when you give us good advice, it doesn't have an effect on our hearts. The Shaykh said, oh, okay. So this Quran and the Hadith, the words of the Quran and the words of the Hadith do not have an effect on your heart. Don't say to me that your hearts are sleeping. The reality is that your hearts are dead. So one of the diseases of the heart is that it becomes very difficult to listen to good advice. And I see sometimes young people, they don't listen to what their parents say. They say, oh, we've listened to this 100 times before. This is what my father says all the time. And this is what my mother says all the time. They don't listen to it carefully. And when they don't listen to it carefully, they go away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because listening carefully to the elders is a sign of adab. And the more adab you have, the more taqwa you have, the more closer you are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if the elders are saying any piece of advice, even if they have said this 100 times, if you don't listen to it carefully, you're going away from Allah's closeness. So these are the signs of the disease of the heart. The reality of the matter is, my friends and my brothers and sisters, that purifying this heart is our major goal in this world. And you will be surprised what? The main purpose of my coming into this world and what the main purpose of my life is just to purify this heart? Yes. This is the most important purpose of your life. Allah Ta'ala says in the Quran, يَوْمَ لَا يَنْفَعُ مَالٌ وَلَا بَنُونَ. On that day of judgment, neither your wealth nor your children will be of any benefit to you. إِلَّا مَنْ أَتَى اللَّهَ بِقَلْبٍ سَلِيمٍ. Except for the one who brings a pure heart, this pure heart is going to benefit you. So purifying this heart, working on this heart is the most important thing, the most important purpose of our life. And now the question is, how do you purify? And there's 3 different things that the Prophet has told us. And one of them is to do the zikr of Allah. To remember Allah, and the zikr of Allah purifies. It is a magical thing. I must say this. The Prophet ﷺ said, Zikrullahi shifa'ul qulub. That the remembrance of Allah is a healing for the heart, is a cure for the disease of the heart. And you, all of us, must have seen this with our own eyes. The same person who's ready to commit the biggest of sins, and he starts remembering Allah, starts coming to the masjid, starts praying and all that, starts reading the Quran. That same person who's ready to commit the biggest of sins himself says now, no, I can't do this. Nobody's forcing him. What has happened to him? He has done the zikr of Allah. He has remembered Allah, and Allah has cured his heart. His heart is not ready to commit the sin. But this is the beauty of the remembrance of Allah. But sometimes it is difficult to remember Allah because our habits are not like that. And remembrance of Allah, my friends, is not only one thing. If you do extra nawafil, that is remembrance of Allah. If you do a lot of dua, it is remembrance of Allah. If you read a lot of Quran, it is the remembrance of Allah. If you do a lot of istighfar, it is the remembrance of Allah. If you do salawat on the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it is again the remembrance of Allah. So all these forms can be remembrance of Allah. You don't have to do any one way. In fact, if you talk to Allah in your heart, that is also a remembrance of Allah. So one way of cleansing this heart, purifying this heart, is to remember Allah. But sometimes it is difficult. So people ask, is there a simpler, easier way that I can purify my heart and I don't have to spend hours and hours doing the remembrance of Allah? So the Mashaykh have said that there's one more way. That you can actually purify your heart. And it is sometimes even more effective than any other way. And what is that way? That is keeping the company of pious people. Going in an environment which is a pious environment. All of us are dependent on good environment for the protection of our hearts. And some scholars and some pious people of Allah, they have such effectiveness that sometimes even one majlis that we attend in these people's company, it changes our heart. And some are such that even their one line sometimes changes our heart. One last thing I will mention, and then we'll wrap up today's khutbah, inshallah. Zazan, rahimahullah, was a very big scholar of his time. And Zazan was very famous, very pious, wali of Allah, very big scholar. But his youth was very, very neglectful. He had a beautiful voice, he used to sing, and he used to play this one instrument. And because it was the time of the Sahaba, there were some Sahaba who were still alive. So he was among the Tabi'een. It was a time of piety. So he knew that singing and playing this instrument is wrong. It is not liked in Islam. So, because he knew it was wrong, he would not do this in front of pious people. But he would, because he could not control himself. He loved singing. He loved playing that instrument. And he loved all the attention that he used to get from people. When he used to sing, people used to love it. And people used to praise him. But he made sure about one thing, that whenever he would sing or he would play his instrument, none of the pious people are around. He would do it away from their eyes. So once he was singing and everybody was listening to his songs and all that, and he saw that one very, very pious wali of Allah looked like a very big scholar who's passing by. So he got disturbed while reciting the song or whatever he was singing. And his whole attention was diverted to this man who was walking past him. And he looked like a very big scholar, a very big sheikh. And then that sheikh stopped. So he became even more concerned. Then he saw that the sheikh was saying something. He became even more concerned. He thought to himself that, because I am singing, he might be giving me some bad du'as or something, making bad dua for me or something like that. So he was so concerned and tensed that he finally told everybody that today I'm going to stop. If we get a chance, I will sing for you again. So the whole majlis was finished. And then he went to the person who was sitting at the corner and he asked him, who was this man who just passed? He said, you don't know him? He said, no. He said, he's the Sahaba. He's one of the Sahaba. His name is Abdullah ibn Masud, radiyallahu. He said, this is Abdullah ibn Masud. Allah Akbar. And I was singing in front of him. He felt very sad. He said, what did he say? He was saying something. He said, yes, he said this one line. That what a beautiful voice this young man has. I wish that his voice was used for the recitation of the Quran. This one line, Abdullah ibn Masud radiallahu said, and when this man, Zazan, when he heard this, tears flowed out of his eyes. And he asked, where is Abdullah ibn Masud? Where does he live? And he went to his house. And he knocked on the door. And the sheikh came out. Abdullah ibn Masud radiallahu. He came out and he said to Abdullah ibn Masud, Sheikh, you know what? Who am I? I'm the person who was singing while you were passing by, and you said that you wish my voice will be used for the recitation of the Quran. I promise you, from today onwards, this voice will only be used for the recitation of the Quran. So one way of purifying this heart is by being in the company of pious people. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq, purify our heart, and come close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وآخر دعوانا The azan will be called now, and then we will all pray sunnahs, inshallah. The azan is called already? Oh, so you can all recite sunnahs.